Hi, my name is Randy Globus, and I'll be showing you my Astonishing Avatars and how to make a large-scale watercolor painting. Here are some of the characters that I work with, and they all represent different people in my life. There are different friends or family members. The little marionette girl in the middle is me. And I make a lot of these characters from personal items that belong to the people, or sometimes the characters come to me in another way. Maybe they've been a gift from a friend, or I found them in a thrift shop, but most of them I've made by myself. This is a roll of 156-pound cold-pressed watercolor paper. It's 51 inches wide and 10 yards long. In the next step, I'll show you how to prepare this paper to make a large-scale painting such as the one you see here. To prepare this large paper off the roll, I've measured the length that I'd like it to be. And then I will take a spray bottle and I will dampen all the paper, not soaking wet, just damp. And I'll spread the water around with a clean rag so we don't get a lot of uneven bumps. And then when the paper is damp, I'll score the paper with a burnishing tool and make a nice crease. And when that crease is damp, then I'm able to tear it and maintain the nice deckled edge that watercolor paper has. The following day, I'll take that large sheet of paper I've now created, flip it over, and I'll dampen the other side and let that dry completely. And that makes the paper pretty nice and flat to work on. This is how you score and tear watercolor paper to keep that nice deckled edge. Burnishing tool, but I guess you could use any kind of a blunt pointed tool. Okay, I have a pencil line there. I'm putting a nice crease with the burnishing tool. And I'm putting weight on the straight edge. And I'm lifting and tearing. And then you get that nice deckled edge that we like with watercolor paper. My work is very content driven. I'm trying to tell a story about the characters in the painting and the relationship they have to each other. So I'll set up a still life and do a photo session with different compositions and different lighting to see what kind of feelings I can evoke. And the little marionette girl in this particular painting, her name is Puppet. She's always my avatar. And the other little character in the painting is an avatar of a close friend of mine. And all the elements in this still life setup were gifts given to me by close friends. The title of the painting wound up being Old Friends. Now that I've selected an image from the photo session I did with the still life characters, I'm going to project this image onto the large sheet of paper that I made, and I'm going to lightly draw the contour lines of the basic shapes. Just for the purpose of clarification, this is the finished painting that I'm recreating the process of, so you could see how I've come to make this. The next step that I want to do is create a mask so that I could lay in the background. To create the mask, I need some kind of a transparent material so I could see the light pencil drawing that I put on the large paper. I don't use tracing paper because in the past I've had paint soak through the tracing paper onto my watercolor paper, and I don't want that to happen. And I also don't want to spend a lot of money on something like prepared acetate. So I may take a clear recycling bag, like one of these, and I'll cut it open so that I'll just create like a big, thin sheet of transparent, waterproof material. Sometimes on a large piece such as this, I may tape a couple of bags together to make a very, very large mask. You'll want to tape down the plastic because you don't want it to move, then your mask won't line up. And you need to use a waterproof pen when you're going over the lines to indicate the part you want to mask. Now it's time to cut the mask. I take a piece of cardboard and I slip it under the mask, or I take the mask off the watercolor paper completely. You just don't want to cut directly on the watercolor paper. And with a number 11 X-Acto knife, I carefully cut out the mask on the line that I made with the waterproof pen. Now it's time for me to make some decisions about the background. The mask is ready, the paper is ready. What I'm thinking about most is value. I work from dark to light, and I work from background to foreground. I save the most important focal point of the painting for last, because everything exists in relation to everything else. I want to have a very dark value in the background because I want a full range of values. Then I have much more depth and form to play with. And I also want to direct the light in the background to my focal point. So value is very important. The other thing I think about is, do I want a warm or a cool or a neutral color in the background? So those are considerations, but my most important consideration is value, because if the value is right, everything else is going to feel. So here we are, we've got the mask on the paper, I'm working on the floor. I want to weigh down the edges of the mask. And I call these penny weights, although they're not penny weights, because penny weights are actually 1.6 pennies. But you know, everybody has a bunch of pennies around, so they kind of act like good weights for my mask. And I don't use tape to weigh down the edges of my mask, because for me that would be a disaster waiting to happen. So I just put pennies all around the edges of the mask to hold it in place. For this particular painting, I sprayed the background, and I work with the professional grade transparent watercolors that come in tubes. The pigments are much more permanent and much more saturated than the lesser quality watercolors. So I spray this background completely, and I only go in the direction heading out from the mask. And you've got to let this stuff dry overnight. And then sometimes I go in with a brush and spread it around, or a rag or a sponge, but I'll cover this area completely, and that will be my background. The background of this particular painting, when the spray was dry, I went in and I redampened it a little bit, and then with a clean rag that was damp, I spread the paint around. Now, sometimes I use a big brush like this, or sometimes I use a sponge. It depends on the effect that I want to get. But I wait until the following day after the paint has dried, because initially the paint is just too wet to work with. So the next day you can make it kind of as wet as you want it to be to create different values in the background with a sponge or a brush or a rag. You kind of see what kind of effects you'd like to get.